I'm Scott Al Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. A number of times it comes up in the conversations, especially on the WhatsApp group for the expats, that people are asking how they can go about using marriage as a way to get a green card, or especially to get citizenship here in Nicaragua. Or, as a case came up today, someone was concerned that getting married in Nicaragua might look like they were trying to get citizenship by doing that, and they wanted to avoid the false impression and coming across negative when they weren't intending to do that. So what a great reason to be questioning whether this is going to work that way, or exactly how it's going to work, or what you need to do to look like that, not look like that, take advantage of that possibility, and so forth. So we're going to talk about the marriage for citizenship situation here in Nicaragua right after the bump. So let's start with the idea that citizenship comes from having a spouse from a specific country is pretty much a tradition that comes from the United States. We have expressions for this that we use in the United States, and that is often getting a green card. We know from, it's a trope in television in the United States and in Europe especially, that people will suddenly get married. They'll find someone who's been living in a country illegally for a while, or is about to become illegal, and or simply, you know, lose their visas, and they'll be like, oh, I need to get married so I'm able to stay. We see this a lot, and there's a lot of popular movies that address exactly this. The famous one in the United States being Green Card, which is actually, I believe, either based on or inspired a better French version. And in both of these countries, one of the things that's interesting is that you can't get married to get a green card. Now, let's talk about what a green card is. We talk about this a lot on the show, but just for those who have not familiarized yourself with this not very clear term, a green card is a permanent residency card. It does not mean that you are a citizen of a country. It does not mean the implication in the United States, the actual residency card is green, hence the term. It does not mean that you get to vote. It does not mean that you're absolutely permanent. It doesn't mean that you can't be deported. It doesn't mean that you can't be denied entry. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means you have residency with no planned expiration date. That is what it means, what we call permanent residency. Now, if you're here in Nicaragua, we have a cedula that is given out to the people who get the similar permanent residency, and coincidentally, it is pale green. So we could call it a green card at Tarjeta Verde as well if we wanted to. So that's kind of a universal thing. We tend to give green residency cards as a tradition, or it probably comes from somewhere that we don't know as a source. I'm sure someone could look that up and have some interesting story why we all use green residency cards, but that's where that term comes from. And there is this television trope and movie trope that people will get, because it's funny, right? It's easy to be like, oh my, this person that we never thought was going to get married, suddenly they're married, and the person that they married is way out of their league, and how did that happen? Oh, they needed a green card, right? Whatever. It's an easy plot device you can throw into a movie. The problem is that many, maybe most Americans have learned about the concept of green cards, are familiar with the concept of getting married in order for someone to stay in a country through this trope. And importantly, of all places, the United States, it doesn't apply. Getting married does not give you a green card. It doesn't even get you really on a path to getting a green card. In some cases, it may disrupt your path to getting a green card. In some cases, it may aid you being able to stay in the country. In some cases, it may make it more difficult. But the last thing it's going to do is magically take you from this long process of getting approved to stay in the country to suddenly having permanent residency. It is the absolute last connection that you could imagine in that way. So that is not at all how it works. This is a false impression that people would do this, or people are doing it without thinking and planning, and then find out that the thing they've done in no way takes them down the path that they thought that it did, right? So that's simply not a thing in the United States, but Americans have a tendency to believe it to be a thing, both in the US, and quite often they then apply that misinformation about their own country to all other countries, and often not because they're being American or anything like that. Simply, this is what they think they know, and they think it's just a standard, and they assume everyone does the same thing. Well, many countries do the same thing, which is not allow marriage to give you a green card. Now, so for here in Nicaragua, things are slightly different. It is true that if you marry someone in Nicaragua, it is very likely that you will be given a relatively permanent residency card for that. But let's back it up a little bit, because that does not mean quite the same thing that it does in the U.S. In the United States, getting a residency card of any type is incredibly difficult, outrageously difficult. It's one of the hardest places in the world, within reason, where you could get a residency card. So trying to get one of those in the United States is like this really big deal. And the idea that if you could marry someone to get one, many people would do that is correct. If you made it that easy, then that would be a path that people took all the time, and good luck proving when someone got married because they were drunk in Vegas or because they needed a green card. Those two things look about the same. So it's very difficult for the immigration services to pick and choose which marriages are good enough for them. So they don't do that. They don't use that as a criteria. So actually, I'm kind of thankful that they don't in some ways, because it gets really weird if you do, but I wish they'd fix other processes. There's not one single panacea, but you see the point. So because we don't do that in the United States, and because that process is so hard, we have this thing where getting a green card is a really, really big deal that people aspire to. It is a dream for many people, maybe a misguided dream in some cases, but no matter how you are opinionated about the overall situation and whether it means what it should mean, for many people, they dream and hope and strive to be able to acquire an American dream card. Yes, that is what I'm sure people call it, a green card. When you're coming to Nicaragua, the situation is very different. Getting permanent residency is outrageously simple. Being able to come and move and stay for Americans is so easy, it's just automatic. And then, yeah, there's some paperwork you're eventually going to need to do at some indeterminate time, but that paperwork is generally pretty simple. It is true, if you get married, that one of the options is that you could get a spousal permanent visa here. It does expire, however, as soon as you are no longer married. Now, in the United States, when you get a green card, it does not expire should you get married in order to acquire it, if that was to ever happen. So it's a little bit different in that way. But in the United States, that green card is this illustrious goal, and in Nicaragua, it's generally just a matter of going through the motions, and you don't have this high risk or any real risk of deportation or not getting to the point where you're able to stay as you go along the path. Meaning, move to the United States as an expat moving to the United States, there's a really high chance you're not going to be allowed in. There's a really high chance that you're not going to be allowed to stay throughout the entire process. There's a really high chance you're never going to get a green card, right? That's a thing that people hope someday to get, and many do, but many do not. Whereas conversely, if you're coming to Nicaragua, there is essentially no real chance that you're not going to be allowed in if you're coming from the United States, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. You're just going, and certainly other parts of Latin America, you're just going to be allowed in. That is the expectation. Just like if you went on vacation to Nicaragua, you wouldn't expect to be turned away. It's exactly the same process. You just show up as a tourist and then you stay. Now, extensions get a little bit less likely, but you can just leave and come right back in. You're super likely to not have any problem. As you apply for your residency, you don't anticipate problems. In the U.S., you anticipate problems. It is unlikely you're simply going to get it. Doesn't mean you won't ever get it, but the process won't be smooth and easy. In Nicaragua, chances are almost certainly it's going to be quick and easy. So the thought process is basically backwards. The idea that someone would bother getting married in order to get a green card doesn't make any sense in Nicaragua, because you can get a green card many faster, easier ways that don't involve marrying someone you didn't want to marry. So there's really no reason that you would do that, not realistically. And in the United States, there's also no reason you would do it unless you're confused about how everything works, in which case you have other problems. And loads of people, I've learned, go to countries based on complete misinformation, never do any research, and just decide to do what turns out to be random things that don't aid their cause and not do any research. Now, all of this, we're talking about green cards. That means residency. But the original question was actually about citizenship, because as it is often seen, one, Americans have a tendency to confuse green cards with citizenship, because people are so excited and adamant about receiving a green card, and we often treat it and call it permanent. We assume that that means something akin to or actually citizenship, but it does not at all. It is very different, and the gap between a green card and citizenship is pretty big. However, it is worth noting in this case, if you're able to obtain that green card in the U.S., you've made it through the biggest of your hurdles. If you get that green card and do nothing wrong and stay in the United States and don't get deported during that time, which does carry quite a bit of risk at this point, you will almost certainly eventually move on to getting citizenship in the United States. It may take a while. It's not 100%, but the chances are quite high. But the big hurdle is getting to the green card. In Nicaragua, getting to the green card is quite easy and almost a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee, but it's pretty close to it as long as you're not doing anything illegal, being a good expat, following the rules and going through the process. This is not a hard or expensive thing. However, getting from the green card to citizenship is all but unheard of. It does exist, but it's more like 1 out of 1,000 people, not 1 out of 5 who are going to be able to do that. And so you go into the process assuming that it is never something you're going to be able to obtain, even if you want it, even if you're doing a lot of good things, even if you feel that you are a really good candidate for citizenship, there's an expectation that you will never actually have that option. And if you do, then congratulations. You're one of a very select few who've gotten lucky and have gone through a very significant process. But importantly, no part of that process in the US or in Nicaragua involves caring if you are married. If the U.S. considers it, it's very much an aside. In Nicaragua, they don't consider it at all. Not that it will hurt you. You're not going to be penalized because you married a Nicaraguan. By all means, go ahead and get married. By all means, have children in Nicaragua. But don't think that these things are going to grant you citizenship or put you on a path to citizenship or put you ahead of everyone else who's hoping for citizenship and already unlikely to get it. You will be able to get residency in any number of ways. Your spouse is just opening another door in a situation where you already have those doors open, right? So it's not that it doesn't open a door, it just opens an unnecessary door in 99% of cases. Yes, there's a fringe case where someone does use the spousal visa to simplify things or do something younger or go somewhere that they just couldn't have before, but that's very, very rare. The more likely thing is for some people, it is more convenient, and that's why they do it. I've never heard of a person who did it for any other reason, but in theory, there are some extreme fringe cases where it could come up that you're simply too young and simply don't have the financial resources to otherwise qualify, and the spousal visa lets you through. But I've never met someone for whom that is true. But getting that green card in Nicaragua does not in any way imply that anyone thinks that they're going to move on to getting that citizenship. And going from the green card to the citizenship doesn't have, when you read the rules, none of it considers marriage or children as a factor. There are very clear rules as to what you must do, and beyond that, it is simply getting presidential or National Assembly approval. Period. That's it. That's the actual hurdle. All the steps leading up to that last one are inconsequential. You basically can guarantee that they're going to happen. Things like staying in the country for a certain amount of time, not breaking the law, pretty straightforward. Once you get to the point where the only thing you're left is the president decide to make you a citizen, it kind of makes you think about the entire process being pointless. If the president wanted you to be a citizen, I guarantee they would find a way to make you a citizen. And if they don't want you to be a citizen, you're not going to be one. It comes down to that as the final process. And so once you really internalize that that's the only factor that really matters, oh, yeah, there's no way that you're just going to do something and have it look like you're trying to get citizenship, because nobody anywhere in the government or expat groups or people you meet on the street has ever considered the idea that marrying a Nicaraguan was going to give you citizenship. That would never cross anyone's mind because it's so far from reality. So even in the United States, that's not true, but it is a trope in the United States in media, so we feel like it's true and we project that on other places, Nicaragua being one of them. Now, there are countries where these things are true. There are countries where by getting married, you get to stay in a country indefinitely and it puts you on a rapid path to citizenship. A great example of that is, or traditionally has been, Italy. 3 years married to an Italian citizen, and I think that's the number outside the country, and like a year and a half married to an Italian citizen living inside the country, you automatically become a citizen too. That's fantastic. It's neat that some places do have that process, but they are the rarity, not the norm. Some places may consider it a positive. Nobody's going to really penalize you for it, but it is not a given pretty much anywhere, with rare exception, that marrying is going to cause that to happen. Just don't have that in your head, because it will throw you off. So if you're thinking about getting married to a Nicaraguan, by all means, go ahead and do that. You don't have to worry about how it's going to affect things, and you really don't need that to be able to move to the country. So if you're feeling any pressure to get married because you want to live in Nicaragua, no. You get to live in Nicaragua, plain and simple. That's how Nicaragua works. This is not a country that is looking to kick you out. This is not a country that is looking to limit your options. This is not a country that looks at the color of your skin or looks at the color of your passport and says you aren't the kind of person we want. They are looking for people who want to live in Nicaragua and make a positive impact. Where you come from or the color of your skin are not things that they are discriminating about. That is not the culture here. That is not the political process here. That is not the immigration process here. This process is easy. Now, there are countries that don't have good relationships with Nicaragua and are harder to move from. That is true. Mostly the situation is that they are small countries far away and they don't have shared political ties where they have a process for their embassies to talk to each other, right? They don't have consular support. That is a unfortunate logistics challenge. It is not a statement that those countries don't want to work together. It's that the number of people moving between them is so small that they can't afford to have easy processes for them. You got to work through third-party nations and distant embassies, and that is just an unfortunate reality of life in small, non-world superpower countries. It is what it is. If you're coming from major countries to Nicaragua, all of those processes are in place and things are going to be easy for you because Nicaragua is simply in the business of being a warm and welcoming place. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. Support the channel by buying me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. Watch another episode. It makes a big difference. Let people know about the show. I will see all of you tomorrow.